take another line directly behind the shoulder. One of the important lines. Because when your saddle is on the horse, the gallop blade always has to stay behind the shoulder. If you have a saddle with a flap cut forward, the flap can go on the shoulder because that's soft, it goes away when the shoulder moves. But the gallop blade, it's a metal part, and this has to stay behind the shoulder and it has to have the right angle. And the other thing is to check the length of my saddle support area. Therefore I just take my hand along here and feel the last rib, and then I go up just in that direction, make a little mark over here, and to be sure that this is the right place, you can just follow the lines of the hair. You can see it quite nice with him, like this, where the hair comes together, and then you go up straight. Normally it's one line. So this is the 18th spine, the end of the 18th rib. So why should the saddle not be longer? I mean, it's quite easily said, isn't it? Because I mean, we want the rib cage to carry us. We don't want to sit in the loin area because that's quite hard for the horse. It's just like somebody's always pushing just in your back, and then you make your back hollow and you don't bring it up. That's the problem. So if the saddle is too long, these horses normally either they balk or they just can't canter properly, they just have not the proper rhythm anymore, or they just throw their heads in the air, they refuse just to canter. So that's a clear sign normally that they really are affected by a long saddle. And the next thing is, you have an area here where you just take your hand, put this part at the end of the hair, and just make a line. This is, everybody knows when you put a saddle on a horse, you should have space, two to three fingers on top. But most of the people don't know that you also should have at least 2 fingers to the side, because here we have a nerve which starts up here, it's called CN11. It goes down, follows the spines, comes up, and the end of the nerve just comes out here. They're directly under the skin. So if you put pressure here, the horses, it's just, it's nice. When the stallion jumps on the mare, he normally bites here or here where the trapezius is. And even when young horses are playing together, they just bite the other one here and then they try to slow it down. So if this nerve gets pressure, it's blocking the front legs. So they don't want to move anymore. You can see that if the saddle is too tight here, you see that the horses are just walking, I always say, like a ballerina, very short steps. They can't move their shoulder anymore like this. So you always should take care that the saddle really gives space around the middle. The next thing is you take your fingers just on top and go straight up. You can feel, you have the spines here, and you can feel next to the spines. I always say it feels like a rubber line. You feel that? Yeah. You make that on both sides, you just feel it, and then you put your fingers, and then you can check how wide the wizard channel needs to be. Because one thing are the spines, and the other thing is this little line next to the spines where the ligaments are. So the panel should not push into this line, because then the horses, normally they just want to go away from the pain, so you are riding smaller circles and they get pressure from the panel and then they just try to refuse, they try to go in the other direction. So the next one, last line is just over here. You go up, you feel the end of the rib cage here. So this edge, this is where the ribs just down underneath the longissimus muscle. You have the long spines here, and the ribcage just ends underneath, and this muscle is 6 to 8 centimeter thick, and this is the area where the saddle should lay on the horse. Without putting pressure on certain points, it should really lie very smooth down here, because this muscle is not meant to carry, it's meant to move. So it just has to move free under the saddle. So it's quite important that you always check your saddle if the panel is nice and flat laying on the horse's back. Otherwise, you have pressure here, you have pressure here, that's what mostly happens, so the saddle is bridging. And you can imagine, I always say it's quite easy to imagine when you try it by yourself. I'm sorry. It's different when you press somebody your hand in the back like this, or I don't take the hand with the ring, or you do it like this. So it's much nicer this than that. So just try to feel how your horse feels, and the best thing is always just to try it by yourself. Like also when, because it's painful, sorry. When the gallop angle is too narrow, it is really like when the shoulder is back and you take your fingers in the shoulder and then try to move. That's really an awful feeling, and that's how the horses must feel when you are always pinching like that. So this is just a normal tree. Like saddles are built the last 200 years with a gullet blade. This is a quite long one, and it's looking like an A. So I think most of you know that the shoulders of the horse, when the horse is not trained, or you have a young horse or a horse was sick and you start to retrain it again, the shoulders are more like this, come together like this, and in between you have the rib cage quite low, and the horses don't have, how is this bone called?
Sleutelbeen.
Okay, everybody knows what I'm talking about. So the horses don't have this one. The rib cage and the shoulders are just connected through the muscles, so they are not. There's no bony part. So if you start to train your horse in the proper way, the rib cage comes up, the back comes up, and the muscle becomes stronger. So this means as long as you are riding, the shoulders are just coming up, the angle changes, but then you continue and the distance between the shoulders becomes wider. So what is happening, kannst du das nach oben schmeißen? Nee, den hier. Kannst du? Hoch? Hoch? Ja, okay. Hoch. So if you have your horse's shoulders, you just buy a saddle and it gets nicely adjusted, and the shoulder and the gallop angle are just parallel. So then you start to ride and the shoulders are coming up. So when you call your saddle fitter, and he can work with flocking a little bit just to bring it up, to make it a little bit more room. But you also have the problem that most of the time you just get pressure here and this angle goes away. That works for quite a while, because the horses are not screaming when they get pain. But when you're really working, doing a proper job, and this archer ride really brings the back up from the horses, so then you have the problem that the distance between your shoulders gets wider and wider, and then the horse's shoulders always just pinching against the gallop blade. And of course there's a panel underneath, but if you take your fingers and just try it for a few days, just to make 10 minutes a day like this, you can't work after 1 week anymore with your hands. So this constantly touching the gallop blade with the shoulder really makes a long-term damage to the horse. And you can't do anything if this is destroyed. And as these wonderful animals, they are not screaming, and they really try to please us, and they are working even when they have pain. So quite a lot of horses, they just show it when it is too late. I prefer the sensitive ones like Yvonne's. Wilco always says immediately, okay, I don't like it. He's very, very sensitive because he's quite uneven. But most of the time, people start to realize that there's something wrong when the horse starts to to become lame. And then the vet starts to check from down up there, and we can't X-ray this one. We only can go into the, how do you call it, MRT? Quite expensive. Yeah. You can do that, but it's difficult to see anything here. There are a lot of studies, and we have seen that when it really came to the point that the vet opened that, then you can see it, but can't do anything. So that's really sad. So I just want to explain you. So this is a normal tree, like we had it all the time, and you can adjust the angle, but not the width. You can't make it wider here. So.
Oh. Whoa.
So I'm not sure who wants to feel how far the shoulder goes back. Anybody wants to feel where the shoulder goes? So if this gallop plate is not fitting, if you just put this hand, just not fix. If you just feel where the shoulder is and how far it goes. You realize where it is, and it's really, and I mean the shoulder is here. It really goes up to here. That's the place where it goes. Nothing here. It's really far. Normally we say, I want to see that. One moment. We have the line behind the shoulder. We have the line. You can make another line at the end of the shoulder. And when the horse just lifts his front legs, normally it goes up to the middle of these two lines. That's how far the shoulder goes backwards. And that's why it is so important that the gallop angle is really in the right position. So.
Yep. I want you to take a picture of the so that I can see more accurate voice.
So I also have to say a few words about our saddles, of course. No, it is really. It's always
Can we release the horse or is she
just a short moment, 2 minutes. It's always a little bit difficult when you come to a clinic like this and people expect, okay, you want to sell saddles. Of course, we are happy if somebody buys our saddles, but the main thing is, I mean, I'm a professional horse riding instructor since 30 years, and I started to work with saddles because I was so annoyed about so many bad fitting saddles. And like we saw Tim this morning, he's really working hard, but with the saddle he has, there's no chance that he can sit in balance because the stirrup pass is so much forward, so he's sitting like this. So Will says, okay, you have to come in a better position, and he's struggling against his saddle. And that was what I was suffering for, because you are standing in the middle of the barn and you try to explain and you see the horse can't move properly, the people can't sit properly. So it's a little bit a waste of time and money, and it's sorry for the horses and the riders. So so we just Peter Horobin, he was a jockey before, and he started with race saddles, and then he thought this idea might work in the equestrian saddles as well. He sold his saddles since 30 years in Australia, and I got to meet him 2 years ago, and I really found the idea so good that I said, okay, I start to import this saddle to Europe. He started to make a gallop blade like this, which is much wider and much shorter, and also he wanted to put the pressure, which you always have. When we make computer pressure measurements, we always have pressure points at the 3 points, because sorry, one more time. Of course, when you have a saddle like this, even when it is well adjusted, these long 3 points, when you girth the saddle up and the rider is on top, you have pressure here. So Peter decided to create this gallop blade. That's one thing. What you can see is that the 3 points are much shorter, and then he also put this round plate over there, and this works with the muscle when you are riding. So that's really a very good idea. I realize that the horses feel comfortable with that, and yeah, that's why we are here, for trying it. I mean, the main thing is when it comes to your horse, just listen to the horse. I mean, that's the only customer you should listen to, because they say it immediately. For me, this system is really working. These saddles are also working, of course, but they just work for 2 or 3 years. They just work for a moment. If your horse develops, there is a certain point where you just can't adjust these gallop plates anymore. That's a thing. And with this one, you can adjust it from very narrow. Of course, you also adjust the gallop angles to the shoulder to really wide. So the last, but I think we can do this.
Can I make a picture of him?
Yeah.